Hey, let me tell you about a book that I recently read on the topic of church revitalization. And full disclosure, I am friends with the author. His name is Don McKinnon, a great guy serving the Lord up in Massachusetts. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But the book is entitled No Cookie Cutter Way, Finding Your Path in Church Revitalization. And the title of the book, No Cookie Cutter Way, what Don says is that, if you read several books on church revitalization, sometimes they give sort of the picture there's this secret sauce, there's secret, if you just do this and plug in this, and if you do that, all of a sudden this church that is stagnant or dying is all of a sudden going to turn around and be blowing and going. And Don says that, look, that's just not the case. Every church is different, every community is different, every pastor is different. And so there's no cookie cutter way. And so that's his big point. But then he does explain there's some principles that do apply. They may look different in different places and all the rest. And so it's a great little book. It's a book that, quite frankly, most churches could use church revitalization. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but Chuck Kelly used to always say that I think it was like 75, 80% of Southern Baptist churches are either plateaued or declining. And so the vast majority of Southern Baptist churches, at least, and I think it's the same in pretty much across denominations, could use revitalization. And so Don has really found his niche in this, and really his heart. I shouldn't say found his niche. God has given him a heart for church revitalization in his own church there in Massachusetts, in New England especially. And so he does podcasts. It used to be called the the Practical Church Revitalization Podcast, and he did it with a couple other guys, and now he's doing it himself and his wife, Natalie, a wonderful wife that he has serving alongside of him there in ministry up in Massachusetts. I think the new podcast is called Keep Moving Forward. I'll try to remember and put a link down in the description to the podcast, to Don's sermon YouTube videos from his church, as well as, of course, an Amazon link to the book that you can get. Let me encourage you to get it. Let me tell you a little bit about the book. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but walk you through it. I don't want this to be a long video, but it's very interesting because he gives personal anecdotes and personal stories. He tells a little bit about the history of his church, which is fascinating. It is one of the oldest churches in Massachusetts, meaning one of the oldest churches in the country. I think it's getting close to 300 years old. Their original building, get this, their original building was destroyed by the British, was burned down in the Revolutionary War. I mean, so there's some history there. George Whitefield preached there. Isaac Backus preached there on their preaching tours and stuff. Not pastoring there, but there's a fascinating history of the church, and which ties into one of the things that he has done there. He led the church to change its name. Apparently, over the long course of the years, they've had sort of a confusion about their names. Are they First Baptist Church of Sutton, First Church of Sutton, all these different names, and they decided to sort of rebrand. I think that's the popular terminology now, rebrand, and he changed the name. They changed the name to Legacey Church. Which I think is genius. That's a genius name because it ties in with the history of the church, legacy, but it's fresh and new, and so pretty neat. And that's one of the things that he says in the book. One of the principles is to get to know your community and get to know the history of the church and what's going to work and not work and where are the pitfalls and all those things. And every church is going to have different histories and different baggage and different communities. And you need to get to know those things before you just come in and try to launch somebody else's strategy in your location. So very helpful in that regard. And Don's very transparent. He's just a transparent guy. When he's on social media, as well as in the book, he tells the great things as part of church revitalization and the difficult parts and everything in between. And so I would highly recommend this book. to you. And let me say this. Well, I actually met Don a few years ago. I think he started pastoring there, I think he said about 6 years ago. And it's been several years now. My son was a student at UMass. He was getting his master's degree at UMass in Amherst. And so we were up in that neck of the woods and decided to go take a day trip over to Sutton and meet with Don and his wife. And they were actually that day that we went. I'll tell you this, and sort of this kind of gives an idea of Don's heart and that he practices what he preaches. I mean, he's the real deal. I mean, he's not putting on an air or anything. He is in the trenches getting it done. And so one of the things that he found was very important for them is to get their name out in the community, let the community know we love you, we're supporting you, we're on all that and that. And so the day that my wife and kids went and visited him actually that day, and we just kind of dropped in on him unannounced. They were having an event at their church. It was sort of like a farmer's market, craft show, craft fair type of thing, and different people from the community were set up in their fellowship hall selling their stuff and everything, and just a neat thing. And the community was coming out, and Don and his wife and other members of the church were able to meet people and get to know them and tell them a little bit about the church in a non-threatening atmosphere. And so he comes up with stuff like that, doing a great job there. And so if you want to know his heart and benefit from his experience and his study, get a copy of this book. It'll help you and your church, wherever you are in the process. And buying his book, I hope he didn't mind me saying this, it'll probably help a brother out. It's a small church up there, and he's bivocational. I don't know how much the church is able to give him, if anything. I don't even know if he gets a salary. If so, it's probably not much. And so he teaches school as well. And he self-published this book. And so if every one of the people that watch this book review buy a copy of the book, it might be able to put a few gallons of gas in his car. Well, probably not a few gallons. Maybe a meal at the grocery store. Maybe at least a gallon of milk or half a gallon of milk. I don't know. But no joke. Go to the Amazon link and buy a copy of his book. You won't be disappointed. It's an easy read. It's a quick read, but it's packed with his own experience and everything. So let me go ahead and cut this video short. I said it wasn't going to be very long because I want you to get off of YouTube and go read a book.